Hello, everyone. Uh, Welcome to our fifth meetup on Romania Power BI and Modern Excel user group. We have the pleasure today to have Chandeep Chhabra as our guest. Thanks for accepting to come and speak to us, Chandeep.
Sure, my pleasure.
It's a great honor to have you. We will shortly go through some introduction slides, and then Chandeep will start his session. First of all, please make sure during Chandeep's presentation all mics are muted and the videos are turned off for the recording quality. Type your questions or comments in the chat area and use a queue in front of the question so we can spot them easier. The last line with recording the meeting, it's actually a note for myself. It's good thing that I already started the recording. The recording itself will be placed on SSBI Central YouTube channel probably early next week. Few words about our next meetup. It will be on the 29th of July, but it's a surprise. I don't have 100% confirmation. This is why I don't want to say anything for now. But you will be notified in time. I assure you, it will be a nice surprise. But wait for the announcement. We should get going with Chandeep. As I told you, he's our special guest today. I've learned a lot from Chandeep during the last 3 years, I think, when I first discovered his YouTube channel. Chandeep, I actually started with Power Query. I was looking for some Power Query tips and tricks, and I'm really glad that your first session on Romania Power BI user group is on Power Query.
Nice.
I took also some 2 courses with Chandeep on DAX, and I totally recommend it to everybody. Just go to goodly.co.in and see his courses. They are really good and they are really real life applicable. So that's everything I can say, and it's really good. So Chandeep, take it away, and thanks again for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Christian, for the nice introduction. Hi, guys. How's everyone doing? I hope everyone is being awesome. I don't really expect that everybody knows me here, so I will just spend 2 minutes to talk about myself as to who I am and where am I based and what do I do. Christian has said pretty much about me. My name is Chandeep. Currently based out in Dubai. About 6 months ago, I was based out in India. That's where I belong. But then during the COVID, I was bored the hell out of my life, and I thought maybe just do something fun. And I uprooted my entire life, and I settled once again in Dubai. So yeah, that's a little a thing about where do I stay as of now. I stay in Dubai as of now. In terms of work, Goodly is my full-time work. Essentially, I do a lot of training and consulting work for small and large companies. These companies are mostly based out in India, UAE, which is where Dubai is, and also in the US. So both training and consulting are my full-time gigs at Goodly. And apart from that, whatever time is left, I spend that time on writing blogs and just creating several courses and some YouTube videos and whatever fun stuff that has to be done apart from work. So yeah, that's pretty much about me. I'd like to get started with the Power Query, and I don't really want to talk about the interface of Power Query. Everybody kind of knows about that, but I definitely want to talk about some very nifty M code tricks that you can actually follow inside of Power Query to make your queries more robust, more smarter, more automated, and that sort of stuff. So I have handed over Christian a file. I'm sure you will get it, but it's not that complicated. Even if I open it up on the screen, you should be able to follow along.
I'll try to put it in the chat.
Awesome. So allow me to share my screen in case, so I'd not be looking at the chat here. And in case anybody of you have any questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask me right then and there. I think that's going to be okay with Christian too, I believe.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, awesome. And then, of course, we'll kind of spend a bunch of time at the end to answer any of your questions regarding any of the stuff that I'm discussing here, or anything that I can possibly answer around Power BI, DAX, sort of stuff. Anyways, guys, so what I want to talk about today is a list. There is something called in Power Query. Let me just set the context first. So there is something in Power Query called a list, and it's a pretty basic feature. I'm sure you must have witnessed it. I'll talk about that, but then I'll also talk about several applications of lists and how can you automate lists. We'll also talk about lists of lists. So one larger list which has many smaller lists inside of that. So we'll also talk about that. And fun stuff, practical stuff that you can apply in your work. In this session, I'm just going to try to give you practical applications of list and list of lists. But then once you understand that how am I using these things to solve some real life problems, you can then go ahead and apply these things to wherever they are applicable. And I'm going to give you a few places where they're applicable. And I'm also going to give you patterns in which you can identify the list and list of lists. No further speaking, let's just kind of speak. And also let me just share my screen so that things become more vivid as I speak about them. Okay, so you can see that I have some very simple data here, which is 2005 data, 2004 data, and 2003 data. These are 3 different years. You can see that the data structure is the same. So we have sales rep, we have customer column, amount column, profit column, and the region column. Nothing that complicated, very simple data. In fact, on all the 3 sheets, the data is the same. The structure of the data is the same. The only difference is that the number of rows can be different, certainly, and the year is different, right? There's no date here. We just have the year and the data of that particular year. For now, let's just keep it on the side. Let's just kind of go ahead and take a look at what exactly is a list. And then we start to kind of fiddle around with the data, start to play with the data and have a little fun. All right, I'm going to go over to the data tab, click on get data, and I'm going to open up a blank query. Now, once I open up a blank query, I want to kind of spend just 2 minutes, not more than 2 minutes, to explain to you what a list is exactly. All right. So let's just say that I'm here in my query, and let's just say that I create a list. Anything that is into curly brackets is a list. And let's just say that if I supply the curly brackets, and if I just, let's say, write, let's say 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, this actually becomes a list. And you can see that this is a list. Anything which is a single columnar table is a list. It's not really a table, by the way. Let me just tell you, it's actually a list. Anything which is one single column and also has the header called list is a list, right? The way to identify a list is nothing but a curly bracket. You will find that almost all the lists that you see inside of Power Query have the curly brackets. That is a list. Now, you can have also like lists of lists. Now, as of now, you can see that in this particular list.
तूने ऑर्डर की कुछ अभी?
नहीं. Hey guys, please be on mute.
नहीं, दूसरा ऑर्डर है.
Let me mute everyone. Should
right.
be fine.
Okay, cool. So you can see that I have a list here, and inside of the list, I have 3 values. So one value, the second value, and the third value. Now, instead of having values inside of the list, I can also have like list inside of a list. So this is a larger list, and inside of that, I can have another list, and then another list. Let's just try to do that. This is like some pseudo examples that I'm trying to use to kind of get the concept of list and the concept of lists inside of your head. And then once we understand what is a list and list of lists, we'll actually go ahead and do some practical work. So let's just say that I am trying to create now a list of lists. Let's just say that a list is something which is surrounded by a curly bracket, right? And let's just say that I am trying to create a list of a list. So I will just maybe have a curly bracket, and I'm just going to write, let's say 1, 2, 3 again in this particular list. But then I'll also create another list, and I'll write again maybe A, B, C in that. So A, and then B, and then C, right? Now, I have to actually take these two lists, the first list and the second list, and pack them together in a single list. So I surround them with another curly bracket. And if I commit to this particular thing, I now get a single list. Inside of that, there are two lists. In the first list, I will get 1, 2, 3. In the second list, I will get ABC. If you want to take a look at the preview of this, I can click on the side of it. And at the bottom, I get to see 1, 2, 3. At the side of this, I actually get to see ABC, which is the second part of the list. Now, this is nothing but a list of a list. So you had a list, and inside of that, you have smaller lists. We're actually going to be doing a lot of work with lists today and lists of lists today to be able to do some fun stuff inside of our query. So let's start. I hope that gave you a clear enough understanding of what is a list and what is a list of lists. All right. I'm just going to get rid of this query. I don't need it anymore. And let's just go over and take a look at our data. So again, simple data for year 3, year 4, and year 5. Let's just try to kind of combine the data together for all the Excel files. I'm going to get rid of this particular Excel file. I close it. I go over to my data tab. In there, I say I would like to get the data from an Excel file from a workbook. And I go over to my desktop. In the desktop, I say, hey, here is my data. Get that data. Now, I am just looking for all the sheets. So I am just going to click on the folder right here, which is the file. I click on transform data, and there I go inside of the Power Query window. All right. Now, let's just kind of create a connection. So let me just do some basic work. You can see that there is a null here, which is what I will change that to a true, so that in case I am fetching the data of all of these tables, the headers are promoted automatically. I don't have to create another step. I did a video on that and gave credit to Christian. I learned this trick from him. All right, so let's just kind of create my source Excel, like a query called my source Excel. And I am also going to keep the data from only the tables. So this is 2005 table, 4 table, and 3 table. And I only want to have the data from these 3 tables. I'm going to get rid of this additional table that is coming in. So in the kind column, I'll say that I do not really want to have the defined name, and just show me the data of all the 3 tables. Now let's just go reference that query, right click, and I'll keep a reference of that query. And I'm going to maybe say combine all years. Right. Now, what I want to do is I want to combine the data of all the 3 years. So I want to have 2005 data, 4 data, and 3 data combined together. What I can do is I can actually keep these 2 columns, right click on the data, remove other columns, and I can go ahead and I can expand the table. So once I click on expand, this is a very, very common step. I'm sure everybody knows it. Once you kind of take a look at all the columns, you can check the unnamed prefix. If you have more columns, you can click on load more and click on OK, and you get to see all the columns there are in the data set. So like you would expect, my data structure was the same across all the 3 files, and I get to see all the columns there are. So I have a sales rep column, I have a customer column, amount column, profit column, and region column, right? Nothing too complicated. Now, let's just say that if by chance in one of the sheets of Excel, one of the names of the column changes, then this query is going to get tanked, because you can see that all the columns that we expanded in this table.expand table column step, these names of the columns were hard coded, right? And because these names were hard coded, Power Query is always going to try to open up these names, right? It tries to look for these column headers. Now, the fun thing is that if you take a look at this particular structure of query, let me just copy that and open up a notepad and maybe show you over there. Now, if you take a look at the structure of this particular query, you would find that here, all right, you would find that this particular thing is a list, because that's in the curly bracket. So you can see that the start of the curly bracket and the end of the curly bracket. These were the columns that you expanded. And in the next row, these were the columns that were renamed. So sales rep got renamed to sales rep. Customer got renamed to customer. So you have the provision of renaming the columns right at the time when you're expanding it. Although this is an optional input, nobody tends to use it in case you are very specific about it. So even if you don't write this particular renaming thing, this query is just going to be fine. So it says that, hey, go in this particular table, open up this particular column, and what columns do you want to open for? You want to open sales rep, customer, amount, profit, and the region. And this is nothing but a list. A list is nothing but a single columnar data. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and load this into my Excel. And let's just try to create an error, a little bit of error. So I'm just going to go over to the Excel file that I was working with. And in that Excel file, in the year of 2005, I will, on purpose, try to call the customer as client this time. Right? This is no more a customer. This is actually a client. Now, if I go take a look at 2004 data, you can see that we have a customer here. It's not a client. If you take a look at 2003 data, it's not a client. It's a customer. Now, let's just save this. And let's just see what happens if I just go ahead and refresh this query. So if I right click, if I say refresh, you will find that because I was hard coding the name of the column that I was expanding, and while I was expanding, the name of the column that I was trying to expand was customer. You can see that. Because in 2005, it did not find the customer, it did not fetch that customer, because there is nowhere you have written that you also want to get the client column. Now, if you go ahead and go back in the query and just write the client column right here, it will start to appear. But if you don't do that, you are kind of stuck with a manual query and you'll have to come back and change the query once again. So let's just kind of use some tricks to automate this particular list. I again repeat myself, this is nothing but a list. Let's just kind of use some tricks to get the names automatically appearing in our query once again. So if I just go back to the query, and if I just maybe click on edit, let's zoom in a bit, and let's just go take a look at the step right here. You can see that if I just probably manually add client here, CLIENT, and maybe I don't really need this part. This is optional part. If I now commit to the formula, press enter, you will find that I now get the client column. But this adding part should be automated. I should not really do that manually, right? So let's just try to automate this particular list, which is the list of the column names that you're trying to expand it from the table. Okay. Now, let me just go ahead and delete this particular step, which is expanded data. I will use it later, but for now, let's just kind of get rid of that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and open up all the columns there are in these three tables, right? I just want to have the names of the columns. That's all that I want to have. So I'm going to create a new step. And in the new step, I'm going to use something like table.combine, right? In table.combine, I will just mention the name of the column where the tables exist. So you can see that if you just read through this particular output, let me just delete that. If you read through this particular formula, the formula is saying that, hey, can you tell me which tables do you want to combine? So it's asking you for tables. But the tables that you will supply that you want to combine together, they need to be supplied as a list, right? So how do I convert anything to a list? I will write the full name of the step. This is nothing but the name of the entire step. And if I reference only one column of that step, I'm actually referring to a list, right? It actually becomes a list. I can also show that to you. So if I just maybe delete that part and delete that part also, if I now commit and press enter, you can see that I am now referencing the previous step as it is. Now, if I reference only one column of the previous step, if I commit to that, it actually becomes a list. And in that list, there are three tables which I'm trying to combine. So that works. I'm just going to say table.combine. This matches the description. It's actually asking me for a list. I am supplying a list. In the list, there are three tables that I want to combine. So far, so good. I press enter, and what I get now is the combined tables. Let me just zoom in. What I get now is the combined tables of all the three tables that I had: 2003 sheet, 4 sheet, and 5 sheet. So far, so good. What I want to do is I don't really want to combine them, because if I combine them, I tend to lose that year column, which was the name column, right? Now, what I want to do is I just want to fetch the names of the columns there are. So that means I want to fetch the name of the sales rep, fetch the name of the client column, the amount column, the profit column, so on and so forth. So I'm going to actually wrap this around in another function called table.column names. If you take a look at table.column names, table.column name is actually going to ask you, hey, what is the table for which you want to extract the column names? So this function is actually giving me this particular table, right? And if I feed this entire table, if I feed that into table.column names, all that I will get is only the headers of the data. But let me tell you that the headers that you're going to get off the data are just not going to be random headers. They are going to be appearing in the form of a list. So if I now commit to the formula, what you get is that the table was combined. It gave you a table, and that table was fed inside of the table.column names function, and that actually delivered you a list. Now, this list is not hard coded, people. This is actually dynamic, and I can actually take a look at both the columns, which is the client column and the customer column are present here. There is no need of hard coding that. Let's just, for our convenience sake, let's just try to rename this particular step as a column list. And now this column list is going to be fed inside my expansion step. Let's just do it once again to help you recall what we're trying to do. So I'm going to create a new function right here. This new function is referring to the previous step, which is the column list, but I don't really want to refer to this step. I want to refer it to, let's say, this step, which is where I had the tables that I had expanded it manually. So I am just going to cancel this. I am going to say remove other columns, press enter, and I get to have the table once again, which I was trying to expand. But while I was expanding, the column names were being hard coded. It's going to happen again. So if I expand it, uncheck, say OK, you can see that the column names are again hard coded. But nothing to worry about. This sales rep, client, amount, profit, region are pieces of text which are wrapped around inside of a list. A curly bracket is nothing but a list. And I can say that, hey, you don't have to hard code it. I already have created something called as a column list, which I can just feed it right here. So if I take that portion of column list that I have created, just feed it in this part, I think I'm good to go. So I can just write column list, close that, commit to the formula, and press enter. And now, without even hard coding the names of the columns, I have it dynamic, right? If I just close and load, you can see that now I do get a customer column, which is where the customer is missing because the client, it was called client in 2005. But then if I just go ahead and if I take a look at the other years, 2004 and 2003 years, I am going to get the customer column and the client column is going to be missing. Even if I go ahead as of now, and if I go ahead to my data set, and if I just maybe delete or maybe perhaps add one more column, let's just say that I added a new column called ABC, which was not there in 2004, not there in 2003. I just add that, add a random value against all of these rows, save it, come back to Power Query, hit a refresh. I should expect to see now a new column called ABC, which should run only until 2005 data, right? That's what it has. All right. Now, the point that I was trying to make was that whenever you are trying to work with Power Query, do not forget to look for opportunities of working with lists. And just a simple explanation of list is anything that is available to you in a curly bracket, that is most likely a list, right? So whenever you see a list and that list is hard coded, you can find ways to automate that hard coded part into a more dynamic part. And this was just one example. Okay, let's just kind of go ahead and go back to our Excel and delete that extra column that we have created. And as of now, we will let this anomaly stay. So in this particular data, my customer is called as client, which should not be called as client because all the other tables are calling it as customer. And I would like to call this as customer only. Now, if I just go back and hit a refresh on my query, obviously I think I didn't save it. Okay, obviously the ABC column is going to go away because my list is dynamic now. It did not find ABC, and because it did not find ABC, that column was not expanded. Pretty cool. But you can see that I still have two columns, client and customer. Now, the next problem that I want to solve is dynamic renaming of the tables. That means the client should automatically get renamed to the customer, right? Uh, Let me just kind of do a bit of work in order to take a look at what is the M code that gets generated if I manually rename a column or something in Power Query. Let's just go back to the data. And here, let's just reference this once again and only work with 2005 data. So let's just call this as 2005 rename. And let's just increase the size of this, and I will only load this particular table for now, right? This table has been loaded, and let me just go ahead and delete this particular step for now, and let's just call this client as customer, right? Now, once I kind of call this thing as customer, let's just do also one more name change, and let's just call this as, let's say, sales, not amount, but sales. I made two changes in the names, and you can see now, if you take a look at my query right here, you will find that I do not have a single list, but I have multiple lists. If you have been working with DAX, all the shortcuts that you kind of work with DAX are also applicable in the Power Query window right here. Okay, so if you take a look at this piece of code, in this piece of code, you will see that table.rename columns was the formula. In table.rename columns, it's asking, hey, which table should I go ahead and start to do the renaming? So that's the table name, the entire table that you can actually see it on the screen. That table is this particular table. And then it says that, let me just create not one list, but a list of a list. So you can see that initially it packs all the smaller lists into a larger list. So you have like a main curly bracket, like an outside curly bracket, and then you have smaller inside curly bracket. Now, if you carefully note what is there inside of the smaller curly bracket, you will have two parts. The first part is what was the name, old name of the column. This was the old name of the column. And what is the new name of the column is something that you have provided. It's the customer. So every single list is going to have two parts. What was the initial name and what is the new name? Again, what was the initial name and what's the new name? That's what we have done. In case you'd like to maybe rename more columns, we can actually put a comma here and even manually write like a list here and provide the two parts. So your initial name and the new name. But remember, people, you are not anymore working with a single list. You are now working with a list of a list. Like means that there are like multiple smaller lists inside of a larger list. If I have to build an automation, I also have to not build a list, but have to build a list of a list to get around this particular thing. So I don't really want the client and the customer to be hard coded. I want this to be some sort of dynamic so that it becomes easier for the user who doesn't know Power Query to come and change the names howsoever they are, right? That's what I want. And the way to set it up is not to create a list, but a list of a list. And every single list is going to have two parts, the initial name and the new name. Now that we have understood the logic, let's just go ahead and close and load the data, and let's just start to work with our Power Query. I'm just going to go back. That's okay. Let's just come here. I am going to actually copy all the headers of this particular table and copy them to the right hand side here. So miss the copy, Control C, and do a paste special values. All right, now I have the headers of all of these. These are my old headers, or let's just call these as old names. And let's just call these as renames. Like what would I like to call them now, right? So sales rep is going to be sales rep. Okay, client is definitely not going to be client. It's going to be customer. In case you find anything with client, you please call it as customer. Amount is not going to be amount. It's going to be sales, right? Profit is going to be profit. Region is going to be region. Customer is going to be customer. Name, which is the year, is not going to be name, but it's actually going to be year, right? Now, this is where in my Excel, I defined what is my existing column names and how would I like to rename them. Now, this particular table that I have created is pretty much very convenient for any Excel person to come and change the name of the column in case you're not satisfied. In case a new column kicks in, you're okay to change that, and you should be satisfied with that, right? It's very convenient. To be able to kind of get this table into Power Query, let's just convert this into a table, and also rename this particular table into, let's just call this as renames. And let's just take this into Power Query. So I'm just going to click on the table, go over to the data tab, and right here say from table range, and this particular table lands itself into Power Query. Now remember, let me just kind of recap once again. When I renamed the columns, I first of all had to have a smaller list, which is going to be packed inside of a larger list. But then the list is going to have two parts. It's going to have the column name, which is the old column name, and the new column name, the old column name and the new column name, so on and so forth. So I just go over here, and I have to convert this structure, which I have created for simplicity in Excel, for the user to be able to write the names of the columns and write the renames as well. I have to convert it in what format? In a list format with two parts. First part, name of the column, old column, and the second part, rename of the column. How do I do that? So of course, what I need to do is I need to be able to transpose this table first, right? So if you just try to recall, how does a list look like? A list is going to look like a single column, right? A single column is a list. And in that list, I will have two parts. The first entry is going to be, let's say, the old column. And the second entry is going to be a new column, right? That's how a list should look like. Now, if I have to convert the old column and new column, which are stacked vertically, you can see that they are stacked vertically. I have to change the orientation of the table. Right now, they are stacked horizontally, right? The old column and the new column, I have to stack them vertically. So I will transpose the table. So I'm just going to go to the transform tab and transpose this particular table. I also don't like this change type. I'm just going to get rid of that. All right, I have this table transposed, and now you can see that this is the old column, the new column, the old column, the new column, the old column, the new column, so on and so forth. How, people, this is still a table. This is not a list of a list. What I want to do is I want to convert the first column into a list, then the second column into a list, then the third column into a list, so on and so forth. And then eventually I want to take all of these lists, have a larger list here, and then stack all of these lists inside of that. So this is going to be the third one, this is going to be the fourth one, so on and so forth. That's what I want to do, and that's how I am going to get a list of a list. How do I do that? It's very, very simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to surround this function into something like table.toColumns, right? Now, what table.toColumns is going to do is table.toColumns is going to take a look at all the columns of the table that you're providing. As of now, the table that I'm providing is this table. It's going to start taking a look at every single column. And what it is going to do is every single column, it's going to formulate that as a list. This becomes a list, this becomes a list, and this becomes a list. And then it will take all of these individual lists that you have of every single column and pack that together into a single list. So they will all come together and form itself into a larger list. That means it's doing everything for us, right? So I am just going to go ahead and say table.toColumns. I missed out the bracket at the end. I'm just going to supply that parenthesis, the bracket, and now I have a list of a list. Now you can see that if I just maybe click on the side of the list, just zoom in a bit. If I click on the side of the list, you will see that every single list has got two parts: the old column, the new column, the old column, the new column, the old column, the new column. This is exactly what I wanted, right? This is exactly what I want. So I wanted to have a larger list. Then I wanted to have a smaller list, but not just one list, multiple lists. And then, every single list should have two parts: the old column, the new column, the old column, the new column. Pretty good. All right, I'm going to go back to my 2005 rename and delete that part, right? This is manual work. I don't really want that, right? So I'm just going to get rid of this part. Like I would get rid of the individual list, and I will get rid of the main list as well. Delete that part. Now I will supply this particular little thing that I have done right here. This is nothing but a list. Inside of this list, there are smaller lists. They all go right in here. So I am just going to write renames and then close the bracket and press enter. It throws me an error. Now, what is this error? If you go back and take a look at the renames that we have done, it's just, let's just read the error. So it says that I'm not able to find the customer column to rename. I mean, I am trying to rename the customer as a customer, but I'm not able to find it. So if I just go back and take a look at the table that I fed, there is no customer column, because while I was sourcing the data, they changed the name of the customer column and called it client. If I go take a look at my renames here, there is a customer. So if you get a customer column, then you just rename it to be like a customer. There is no change, right? So I can actually provide an optional input here that if you do find a column that you do not get into the database, please just do a missing field ignore, right? If you have a field which is missing out on the name that we're providing, please ignore that. Do not bother too much about it. Press enter and we're good to go. Now you can see that client was called customer, amount was called sales, and profit and region and everything is good. Now I can actually load this particular table inside of my query and we're good to go. The problem is, if you go back and take a look at this, this is only 2005 data, people. If you just take a look at the source, I only fetched 2005 data to just give you an example, right? Now, if you just go take a look at combine all years of the data, what I want to do is I want to actually rename the columns here. Let me just kind of describe the problem that I'm just trying to solve here. So let's just get rid of that. We don't need it. In this particular data that we combined together, which contained all the 3 years of data, in this particular data, I'm getting 2 columns, one for the client, the other one for the customer. Now, just the renaming is not enough. Like, first of all, you would not be able to call 2 columns the same name. So customer and customer cannot be the same name, of course. But let's just say, hypothetically speaking, even if that was somehow possible, you could call customer and customer. I don't really want to call them customer and customer. I want to actually merge these 2 columns and have it as a single name presented in my table, right? That's exactly what I want to do. So let's just go and tweak the query a bit and apply the list of a list inside of the table, the query that we are trying to create here. So if I just open up that particular query, now if you take a look at this particular query, let me just zoom in a bit. Okay, so if you actually take a look at this particular query, in this particular query, I am getting the data of all the 3 Excel files. Then I'm removing a couple of columns. I'm only keeping the data. I'm only keeping the name of the sheet. And then I am extracting the column names, blah, 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 and then combining the data together, right? That's what I'm doing, all the data together. Now, before I combine the data together, what I want to do is I want to change the names of the columns. That's what I want to do. And I will apply the same logic. Now, as of now, if I take a look at the preview of the table, in this particular table, you will find that here, this is a bad name. This should be called as customer. Amount should be called as so sales, sorry, amount should be called as sales, and so on and so forth. If you take a look at the next table, amount should be called as sales, customer is customer, all of this is okay. So I want to make a change to this particular table. How do I make a change to this particular table? If I just go over to the add columns tab and make a custom column. I'm just going to create it like a step in between. And let's just write a quick function. If you recall the function that Power Query wrote it for us, that function was called table.rename columns, I believe. Table.rename columns, right? That was the function. Now let's just start to investigate this function. The first part of this function is, hey, which table are you trying to rename? Now I'm not trying to rename one table. I'm actually trying to rename 3 tables. So this table, then the second table, and then the third table. I'm trying to rename 3 tables. So I am going to say that, hey, the data column contains 3 tables, start to rename every single table. Then I move ahead and I go to the next part. It says, hey, can you give me the renames as a list of a list? Of course, we have created that. That is nothing but renames, and I just apply that. And of course, don't forget the missing field.ignore, otherwise it's going to give you an error. I do that, the 3 parts that we initially had put, we are good to go, and click on OK. We again get a table. The difference between this table and this table is the name change. So you can see that now we have customer. This was changed to sales and so on and so forth, and this is actually good to go. All right, now what we can do is if I just go over to the next step, I am actually extracting a column list. So the column list is not going to be extracted from the data column. It's actually going to be extracted from the new column that we have created, which is the custom, right? So we'll just change the reference from the data to the custom because we have made changes. All right, let's enter. And now you will find that when the list was being combined, it has the correct columns like sales rep, customer, sales, profit, region. Like it has all the corrected columns, right? There is no client appearing, things like that. Let's just go take a look at the next step. I am referencing this particular step, which is added custom, which is where I have the tables. And now I will not expand this particular column, which has the anomaly of the names. I will instead expand this particular, column, which has the correct names. So I expand the data, but I say, hey, do not, what's that? Do not expand the data column. Please expand the custom column. Custom. And that's it. And you can see that now if I close and load the data, I no more have the client renaming, and this is all good to go. All right, that was my second example of list of a list. Let's just kind of go ahead and play around with one last example that I have for you. I think we'll be in time. The next example that I have for you is changing the type of any particular column, right? So if I just go ahead and open up any particular query, let's just this time start to work with 2004 data. So I'm just going to go over to the source. Let's just right click and reference that again. And let's just call this as changed type. All right. Now, for this example, I am just going to work with a single year of data, which is just 2004 data. You can also work with multiple data sets, but for now, I'm just working with a single data type or single set of data, which is for 2004. All right. You can see that I went to the source, I navigated to 2004, and then there was a change type step automatically applied inside of my query. Now, let's just go take a look at this particular thing as well. Again, if you take a look at this particular thing, let me just go over to the advanced editor and I'll be able to kind of parse this easily. Advanced editor. Yep, I'm able to zoom in, and that's my step. So let's just say that
Chandeep, I think you're frozen. Anyone hear Chandeep? Because he's frozen on my side.
No.
Same here.
No, frozen.
Hey, can anybody hear me?
Yeah, now we hear you, Brandon.
Oh, good. My mic does work then.
Yeah, it does, but it seems that Chandeep has a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's wait for 2 minutes.
Maybe he's just building suspense.
The internet in Dubai is not stable.
Yeah, they have other stable things.
Where's he based out of again? Like Dubai or something?
That's what he said.
Yeah, Chandeep is based in Dubai now. And good to have you, Celia. I'm really honored to have an MVP here. The recording will be available next week. You're back.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that, people.
No problem.
Yeah. So
I hope the file is still in one piece, and maybe we can share it with everybody in the end with the final solutions.
Hopefully, let's see. book one. Oh, it's gone actually. That's fine, but I'll kind of create the queries again and I'll send it over to you. But then let's just
Thank you.
actually proceed. So generally people, when they kind of get logged off or thrown off a particular meeting, they say that my PC is old or something is not working, but my PC is brand new. This is a new PC that I have recently purchased, but this is giving me some sort of trouble. It's the worst purchase that I have done this year so far. And I just get thrown off the
Yeah,
meetings every now and then.
I've heard about this before.
You witnessed it, witnessed about it, right?
Yeah,
Witnessed
yeah,
it
yeah.
live. All right, people, sorry about that. So let's just kind of do some fun stuff here. I'm going to go to the data tab, get the data, do all of that hard work once again. Not really all of that work, but partially. So right here, go over there. For now, I'm just kind of getting the 2004 data only. And this is good to go. All right. Yeah. Okay. So now if you take a look at my query, I have this 2004 data. And we were talking about lists of lists, not just a single list, but lists of lists. And I was inside of my advanced editor trying to format this query a little bit just to help you understand better. So let's just do that. This is where the change type step happened. And I want to give you another example of a list of lists in change types, right? So you can see that Power Query automatically applied a change type, and it changed the type for all of the columns that I have in the data set. And if you notice the pattern again, people, this is nothing but a list of a list. So you have like a table.transform column types. That's the name of the step that you can use to change the types of the columns of the data. And this is the table in which you're trying to apply the change. This is the entire table. And what is the type that you want to apply? So sales rep column is going to be applied a text, and you can see that it applied a text. And the customer column is going to be applied a text, and then again it's applied a text, so on and so forth. So you can see that here, this is nothing but again a list of a list. So you have like a larger list at the start, and then you have smaller lists inside of that. The tricky part is that you don't have a text anymore. If you remember the previous example that we just did before I vanished, in that particular example, we had like the old column and then the new column. We had the old column and the new column. But this time we have the column name on which we are trying to apply a data type. But we don't have any other text apart from that. We have a data type, right? This is not, this word text is not a text. Literally, it's a data type. So we have to be kind of smart in not generating a text, but generating a data type, pack it together in a list, and pack all of that together in a list of a list. That's exactly what we have to do. So for now, I'm just going to let it stay on the screen and say done, and let this step stay on the screen, and we have applied the data types right here. What I'm going to do now is let's just duplicate this particular query and call this as data type. Let's just call this as dynamic data type, right? My idea is that if this particular list of list, which is sales rep, again is hard coded, name of the customer, name of the column is hard coded, customer is hard coded, amount is hard coded. I again want to automate this. But then how am I going to identify what type of data type to apply? Either I can apply everything as text, but that's going to be incorrect. So I have to kind of find a way to apply the data type to that particular column. Let's just do a trick. Let's just kind of read the first row of the data. So if the first row of the data is a text, then you apply a text. If the first row of the data is a number, then you apply a number. That's what I'm trying to do. All right, so let's just go ahead and create another query where I will create a structure, and that structure is going to give me the name of the column, and then it's going to give me the type of the column, right? Not a text, a type of the column. So let's just do that. And obviously this is going to be based on the first row of the data. So I am right here, and I just duplicated that query. I did not reference it, I duplicated it. So I delete that particular thing right here, and I just have the entire data. Now from this particular table that appears on the screen, what I'd like to get is the first row of the data. So I can maybe create a new step, and I can write a function called table.firstN, and I can say, hey, here is my table, which is nothing but the previous step right here. Here's a table, and from this table, please give me just one row of the data. That's what I'll say. So comma, one row of the data, commit, and I just get the first row of the data. And once I get the first row of the data, I will start to read what the data is and convert them into different data types. So what I'm going to do is I'm first of all going to demote the headers. So I don't really want the sales rep to be as the header. I want that to be as a text, which I will copy and paste that in a list. So I'm just going to demote the headers. So let's just go to the home tab and say use the headers of the first row, and the headers are demoted. Like they become the actual row of the data. Once the headers are demoted, the last time I explained you the concept of a list, and if you remember, list is nothing but one columnar data. And the way that I want my list is that in the first part of the list, or the first entry of the list, is going to be name of the column, which can just come in from here. Cool. And the second part of that list is going to be not Swati, which is the name of the person, but it's going to be the data type of Swati, which is going to be, let's say, a text. And that's what actually should come here, text, right? So how do I do that? So I first of all need to kind of transpose this table to be able to work with this. So I'll just go to the transform tab and transpose this table. So I have the name of the column and Swati against it and stuff like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start writing a function that identifies what data type do you belong. Are you a text? Are you a number? What are you? So I am going to go ahead and create a new column. And in that column, I'm going to write a very simple function, which is called value.type. Whatever value that you have in this particular column for each row, please tell me the type of that value. So what is it like? Is it a text? Is it a number? What is that, right? So I am just going to go ahead and fetch that, close that, commit to the formula, press enter. And you can see that as a result, I do not get a text. Instead, I get a type column. So if I maybe click on the side of this, I get to have a type, which is some sort of an object in Power Query, a type, and the type is nothing but a text. Inside of that type, there is text written, which is okay. And you can see that this is a text, this is a number, this is a number, this is a number. This is good enough. This is going to feed my query now. I don't need this column anymore. I can get rid of that. Now, the structure that I imagined to create is almost feasible. The first part is going to be name of the column, and the second part is going to be the type. The first part is going to be the name of the column, and the second part is going to be the type. Cool, I'm able to do that. Let's just transpose this table once again, because lists are vertical, not horizontal. And this is horizontal as of now. So I'm just going to go back to the transform tab and transpose this data. And this is going to become one list. This is going to become one list. This is going to become one list. If you remember from the last time, what we did was table.toColumns. In fact, let's just create a new step and do it. So I'll just maybe make a new step and say table.toColumns and back that inside of that. So it simply means that here is a table, which you can take a look at on the screen. In this table, every column should be converted into a list. And then once you have all of these lists, combine them together and pack it together into a single list. That's what it means. So all of the work is done. I have now, you can see that I have a list, like a larger list. And inside of that, I have smaller lists. And the two parts of the lists are the name of the column and the type of the column. Sweet. I go back to my query and I say that, hey, Power Query, there's no need of writing all of this manually. You can just get rid of that. I can just get rid of all of this manual work that was done at the time of like user interface work. And I can just say that this is going to be my dynamic data type. Right, good to go, press enter. And you can see that the amount actually becomes a number. This becomes a profit, like a number again, and the query works just fine. I go back and close and load the data, and we're good to go. Get rid of that particular column, and we're good to go. Now, there's a little bit of caveat into this. If I go back to my data, for some weird reason, if the amount column started to show, let's say ABC as the first input of the first row of the data, this is going to start to convert the entire column into a text-based column. And if you're trying to perform any summarization or loading that eventually into pivot table, Power BI, data model, whatever that might be, this is going to tank. So I just wanted to explain you the concept of lists and lists of lists. And you just have to kind of be worried about that. So if I just come here, right click and refresh, you can see that this actually becomes a text because the first column, the first entry was text. Anyways, we can just revert it back for now. Revert it back, save it. Okay, my Excel got stuck. I'm not going to refresh it. I guess it gives you a good idea to how do you work with the lists and lists of lists. So all that I was trying to explain for the entire session today was that a lot of times, once you're creating your queries, you're going to get several opportunities of witnessing single lists or lists of lists. And then you can do some pretty sophisticated stuff in your queries by just smartly manipulating the hard-coded items of the lists and converting them either into a list of a list or a list, depending upon what query are you trying to write. And those were just a few examples of how do you manipulate with lists and lists of lists. Yeah, that was all about from my side.
Really good, really good. Thank you, Chandeep. The dynamically changing the column names with table.to columns, it's really cool trick, and everybody should know it.
Yeah, that's a very, very handy trick. So in case you have a very anomalous data and the column names keep on changing every single time, you can build a little patchy work inside of an Excel or directly into Power BI by entering data, and you can just rename all the columns to whatever you want.
Yeah, Ron is asking whether you could rebuild the entire solution and share the file if it's possible.
Sure, I'm going to send it over to Christian, and Christian will share it with you on the YouTube video. I think that works.
Yeah, together with the YouTube video next week, the file will be shared. I'll put a link to it. A lot of congrats and mind-blowing. It was really good. Thank you again, Chandeep, for this, for taking the time to show us these tricks.
Sure.
But for everybody else, just check Chandeep's YouTube channel. He has a lot more tips and tricks and a lot of cool stuff there. It's a really good channel. As I said at the beginning, this is how I found your blog and your YouTube channel, searching for something in YouTube, in Power Query actually.
There is some fun stuff that I did recently, and so I was reading. This was long ago. I was reading Phil Seamark's book on DAX, I think the second edition. And he had done a pretty cool technique to generate hex code to apply conditional formatting. In the time, I did not understand the DAX that he had written because it was like a few pages long. But then very recently, I tried to kind of retake the problem once again, and I tried to generate hex code from DAX that apply heat maps automatically to the data. It was a time-based exercise because you already have color gradients and heat maps available in Power BI that you can apply it at a click of a button. But then I just did that for no good reason. It worked. So that video is actually going to come out tomorrow. So in case you're okay wasting a little bit of time, take a look at that.
We will, for sure. At least I am. Always learning from some real life examples can make us think of how we can adapt our own solutions and combine them. Thanks again, Chandeep. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And let me share the next guest for July whenever I'm 100% sure. So told you it's a surprise. I don't want to spoil anything, but next meetup will be on July 29th. Thanks again, Chandeep, and see you everybody.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for having me. I'll catch you around.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chandeep.
Okay, bye bye.
Right.
Thank you.